Hello and welcome. Campbell here from Autodidactic. Hope you're having a fantastic day. And today we're having another chat, and we have Sol Luckman with us. Sol has a channel, so we'll leave the link below. Make sure you go across and subscribe and all that. And basically, as you can see by the picture, he's an artist. He's into energy, resets, history. So we're not really sure where this conversation is going to go, but I'm sure it will be awesome. So welcome, Sol. Thanks for joining us.
Hey, thanks for having me. I've been following your channel for a while and so much good stuff. And like we were talking about a moment ago before going on here, so much variation as well.
Yeah. Like, well, we're just sort of saying that everything's well, and that's the thing. Like when I started my auto channel, and then I wanted to do sort of more, not that I like the words, but mindset kind of stuff. So I started a separate channel, and now it's pretty much become one, the same topic almost. So it's
No, it's interesting. I see that happening with a lot of people. I mean, even recently, I don't know if you're familiar with the work of Dr. Tom Cowan, who's done some interesting research on biology and health and that sort of thing. But even now he has begun dipping his toe into the water of these resets and simulation theory and all of this stuff. It's hilarious. I mean, I was surprised, but not altogether surprised.
yeah, it's happening faster than I thought it would. It's actually like I hear it everywhere now. I mean, I guess it's my, sort of what I see as well, and what I'm being fed. But I think Tartari, it's getting as big as the sort of, mainstream alternative history, the Graham Hancock kind of stuff. I'm hearing about it on a lot of the big MAGA channels. You just hear it mentioned just everywhere. Everyone knows about Tartaria and mud floods, and so I think, yeah, the consciousness is waking up pretty quick. That they spend all this time and effort trying to make us think that it's all going, badly, but I don't think it is. We all want to live a healthier, more natural life. And after the last few years, many of us are a little wary of doctors and their wares. So, in my opinion, it's a good idea to learn how to grow your own. That's right, grow your own medicinal plants. But how do you do that? Well, you do it with the complete natural pharmacy for your backyard. Now, this garden medicinal kit actually comes with the seeds you'll need. It comes with the seeds of 10 easy to grow plants that you can grow in your garden. And then it also shows you how to turn these plants into salves, tinctures, teas, etc., that you can use to heal yourself and your family naturally. There's yarrow, the backyard wound healer, marshmallow, which is great for any digestive issues you might be having, evening primrose, a natural remedy for skin and nerves, and echinacea, which is the most powerful immunity plant, and everyone should be growing it, and much more. So click the link below in the description and find out some more information of how you can start to grow your own medicinal herbs and start to take charge of your own and your family's health. Click the link below and start to heal yourself naturally.
Yeah, I mean, it's amazing to me that people are opening up to this material, and some of it, I believe, is being directed. There's this latest UFO flap, or that's going on with all the stuff happening, and clearly there's an agenda there and that sort of thing. But at the same time, I think there is also very organic, legitimate types of awakening going on,
Mm.
and I'm very excited about that.
Yeah, me too. And I think all the big people are kind of, being exposed for what they are. Just recently we've seen, like people like Logan Paul. I can't remember the guy's name, but that annoying short dark-haired guy who's always talking at universities, the sort of MAGA guy. But all these people who are sort of out there, spruiking their stuff and saying, believe me, and they've been sort of put up as the heroes and the people to follow. They're all coming undone, and people are starting to realize it's actually the people, the real people out there that are just sort of putting their content out, and they're not part of big corporations. They're the ones that we really need to sort of find and listen to, I think.
Yeah, I mean, you weren't talking about Jordan Peterson, were you?
No, no, no. Oh, what's his name? He's of the race that you can't say. And he's got a really annoying voice, and he started off going around to colleges and stuff. And he's a smart. Well, he's got a good memory. He speaks, but I can't remember his name. He's just a young guy, but anyway, it'll probably come to me at some point. But I mean, Jordan Peterson.
Right.
Interesting. What are your thoughts on Jordan Peterson? He's obviously come out recently, on Joe Rogan, talking about sort of parallel or alternative ways of governance, I guess. Um, what are your thoughts on who or what he might be?
Well, I've kind of smelled a rat there for a while. He came out of this kind of near-death experience that he had over the last couple of years, where he got really sick and then became a hardcore jab proponent, actually requiring certificates for his speaking events. And boy, those things almost killed me some years ago. That's what put me on my healing journey and my journey of awakening, if I can use that word. So for anyone to be talking that way and acting that way and requiring that is just, I mean, I don't know. I mean, the word evil pops to mind, but maybe that's an overstatement. Maybe he's just deluded, or he's a tool, I mean, because I see I posted something on my Telegram channel. It's t.me/Soul Luckman if people want to find me over there. But it was it was a recent um, what's her name? She's really good. Amazing Polly. She did
Oh yeah,
a
yeah.
video called Jordan Peterson's WEF Dreams, WEF, and it was all about his this kind of weird alternative to the World Economic Forum that he's putting out that sounds a lot like the World Economic Forum.
But this is the thing is, um, when the people need a hero, one will be given to them, right? I find it interesting that there's been so much talk lately, and it's really ramping up recently about people, leaving the system, right? Everyone wants to live in the private and get out of the public and get away from this corporate, rule. And so there's a lot of talk about how to do that. And then suddenly, wouldn't you know it, someone's put up in front of us with the answer, and everyone can sort of follow them along like the Pied Piper. So it's an interesting one, isn't it?
Yeah, I think they have a kind of stable of people who are being led around by the nose, who are controlled. Maybe they're MK Ultra. I don't know. I really
Hmm.
don't know how they do it in every instance. So I'm sure that there is MK Ultra activity going on. There's also good old-fashioned honey potting and bribery and other ways of manipulating these figures, and then they bring them out as needed when they're pushing a specific narrative. I mean, there's a kind of uh, Machiavellian genius to the way this is done. I mean, you have to admire it from a gamesmanship perspective. I think if you don't, then you're just being foolish because
Uh,
you're not honoring and respecting your opponent, if you want to use that word.
they're committed.
Ultimately, I don't really think of adversarial relationship. Just to be clear, I don't necessarily think that we have opponents. I don't necessarily think that there is an enemy in an absolute sense. I like the Aikido perspective that the real opponent is yourself.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's another um, topic, I guess, or thought stream that's coming out lately is this whole, does the devil exist? Does God exist, or is it just us, right? Because we all know that the picture of the angel on one shoulder and the devil on the other, and we're kind of in the middle, right, making the decision. So, all these stories about the devil and that, it's I think we should be bringing everything back to us, and it's us, right? If we're listening to the wrong people and taking that on and acting that way, then we're the devil or we're God, right? I think it's interesting what's happening with religion at the moment. Some people are going more and more hardcore into it, and some people are just seeing straight through it. So it'll be interesting to see what happens in the next sort of couple of years. But I do see, yeah, something on the horizon that I think they've got, ready to throw at us after the alien invasion, of course. But
After the alien invasion. It's hilarious you just talked about the angel and devil because I wrote a book in 2017 called The Angel's Dictionary, and it's a satirical lexicon in the vein of Mark Twain and specifically Ambrose Bierce with his The Devil's Dictionary. And on the cover is a guy with an angel and a devil sitting on his head talking, basically. And so there's a definition in the dictionary that also speaks to this conversation. Shadow self. It's a noun and it's defined as the self that you see when you do not look in the mirror.
ah, nice. That's a good definition.
And I think we have all of these people who are just not looking in the mirror. They're not acknowledging their role in things. They're not seeing who they really are. They're certainly not seeing the fullness, the totality of who they are.
Mm,
And it's a profoundly disempowering situation because people are kind of being led away from their true nature, and they're being led into narratives having to do with race and the politics of shame and all of this crazy wokeness. And all of it, in my estimation, is designed to not only to separate people, but to dumb down, belittle, and reduce people's power.
yes. Yeah, that they externalize everything. So that's looking in the mirror, you just see the physical, right? And then when you see that, you've got all this programming coming in from society. You're too short, you're too fat, you're too skinny, you're not this, you're not that. And so when you do
Right.
that, yeah, this is the whole judgment thing. You don't actually see who you are, and that ends up in all these people running around it, yelling at the world to change, right? It's all physical, uh, you know,
Yeah, yeah.
yeah. And even with this whole, trans agenda that's going on, the time that we're living in, it's sort of, I think a lot of people are feeling that, that we need to internally combine the masculine and the feminine. Of course, and they're externalizing that as well, right? And they're like, no, no, it's physical. It means you got to cut your bits off.
Physical thing. That's right. I mean, that's a really, really good point. I've been talking about the need to harmonize those potential dualities, in our systems in an alchemical way for a very long time, but I didn't necessarily mean to do it to the actual body that you live in, which, I mean, I don't know what I think about that. I don't have a blanket thought about the trans movement, and I've known a lot of people in a lot of different circumstances over the years. But I do think that I will say that I think exposing children to that choice early on and um, providing surgeries or drugs toward those ends is a very bad idea.
To put it lightly, this is the thing. Yeah, I mean, it's not. It's got nothing to do with trans people. It's the agenda behind it that's pushing it, like you say, to the younger generation, and obviously the money machine behind it. They're profiting off this as well, which that they love to do, right? So, um,
Yeah, they love to do things
mm,
that where we kind of sign up for our own failure and then make money off of that failure.
exactly. And when it gets down to it, and we hear it all the time, like we have to accept all this stuff, really, don't we? And people argue and argue, but really, we choose all this stuff, en masse, of course. We choose the collective reality, but every day we choose, right? Like if we're going to accept this stuff and move towards it, or if we're going to say no and move away from it. So, it really is all our fault when you get down to it.
Yeah, well, I really appreciate that there are people like you out there who are willing to have this discussion and really willing to raise the possibility that we are just really responsible for all of it in some way. Not that we have to save the world, but that we are responsible for our experience. We are responsible for what we're putting out and what's being mirrored back to us. And in that lies great peril and also great potential.
Mm. Yeah, yeah. I think that's the major word is potential. Is that's we're all potential, and I heard a quote, I think it was from Dolores Cannon, and it was something like, we already have everything. Everything's already there for us. It's just us that's blocking it.
Yeah, I can't disagree with that. That sounds about right to me.
Yeah, it's just a different way to look at it, right? Again, it's all us. All right, so we're a bit in, but do you want to introduce yourself? And of course, we'll put all the links below, for your books and everything. So everyone watching, if you want to get more info or check out his books, they'll be in the description. So yeah, tell us a little bit about yourself. You mentioned your awakening and you're getting sick and near death and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, introduce yourself, Sol.
Okay, let's see. That's always the
Don't you hate
$4
that?
million question. It's so funny, you used the word potential a moment ago. So I wrote a book, and I know this is a lot about books, but that's what I do. I'm a writer. I wrote a book in 2010 or 2009 called Potentiate Your DNA. And it's about this form of sound healing, energy medicine that I developed with my partner Lee when I got really, really sick. And there was a whole shamanic component to this and that kind of thing. So that book is a kind of meditation on our potential and how to activate it. And that's actually a do-it-yourself guide. So it teaches you how to do this work. And so people have been doing this now for years and years. And so there's thousands and thousands of people all around the world that have benefited from this work. In fact, we have a handful of facilitators, or at least two in Australia, or one's actually traveling right now. Brendan Murphy, a really good
Oh,
author,
I know
and
that name,
yeah,
Brendan
and
Murphy.
so
Yeah, yeah.
yeah, he wrote The Grand Illusion, and he would be fun to have on your show. He's a powerhouse. He's got a lot of really wonderful content.
Has he got kind of dark hair, kind of longish dark hair?
Longish, yeah, I would say
Yeah, yeah,
brunette,
yeah. Okay.
some sort of a thin, angular face.
Yeah, yeah,
He and
yeah.
I did this hilarious. He and I collaborated on this hilarious spoof satire song a couple of years ago, "How the Deep State Stole Christmas," and this was right in the middle of the pandemic. So
No,
I wrote the lyrics, and he performed it to the tune of the 12 Days of Christmas, and it was very, very funny. And of course, it was immediately banned by
and yeah,
YouTube and every,
yeah, yeah.
so that didn't work out too well. But otherwise, it's become a little bit of a cult classic. But he would
Nice.
be really good to have on your show.
Yeah, cool.
So I was trying to outline kind of where I was coming from. That was my story of how I got sick, how I got well, and the sharing of a lot of my thoughts on the relationship between consciousness and our energy and genetics, how all those interface. And so I encourage people to check out Potentiate Your DNA. And that was a sequel to the first book that I published called Conscious Healing, which is more of a macro view of this method that is called the Regenetics method. So it's Regenetics method, and there's one activation that you start with called potentiation. So that's why Potentiate Your DNA is the title of the sequel to Conscious Healing. But Conscious Healing is about the role of consciousness in healing, and I get into a lot of considerations. One of the maxims that I write in that book is that consciousness creates. Just period. Consciousness creates. That's how it works. That's what's creating. Also, another piece that I brought through was to share this maxim. Light is about information, sound is about transformation.
Ah,
But we can talk, we
nice.
can think, talk, and intellectualize all day long. But what really catalyzes healing, from my perspective, at a very deep level, is the use of sound.
Yes, for
Because I
sure.
know you have some recent videos that were very interesting on cymatics and cymatic cathedrals and what the heck were they doing. And, there's all of Dr. Leonard Horowitz's work on what the Gregorian chants used to be, the actual notes they were using. Were they using these things for healing and for longevity and this kind of thing? I think the answer is absolutely they were. So tons of people have been looking at what was going on and what people, are calling Tartaria these days. But what were they doing back then? What were these structures? What were these pipe organs? What were these chants all about? Why did they change our musical scale and take away the solfeggio notes and all of that? In all of these questions interrelate, like we were saying earlier. It's all one big story.
Yep. Yeah. It's just all one, right? It's the one song, the universe. Yeah, that I saw that you a bit of one of your videos where you were talking about sound healing. I actually spoke with Eileen McCusick last week. Don't know if you know about her, and she
Oh,
does,
nice.
yeah, tuning fork stuff. So um because
Oh, yeah.
yeah,
He's a friend of mine.
well, there you go. Small world, eh? Um yeah, I don't know if you know, but I drove my car into a tree a few years ago. No brakes at 70 Ks, and so I've still got like nerve damage in my
Oh,
left arm. So yeah, I've been looking into the
so
sort
you
of,
got some tuning forks and you got a biofield tuning book.
I've got just some they're not the best ones, but I've got some just to get some, but I need to get some good quality ones, but they'll get me through for now. So I've just, yeah, got to work out how to use them properly as well, I guess. I've just sort of been meditating with them, but yeah, so that's the thing, like with
Her first book is called Tuning the Human Biofield. It would be a really good place to start because you'll get enough basic information to play around with those and maybe get some results.
all right, cool. Because yeah, I think it's, and I mean, this is the thing, this is the way that um healing's, I mean, it's the way healing's got to go, not the way it's going, but it's good. I mean, after the last couple of years, there's so many people that just don't trust, the medical system anymore. And so we need alternatives. And of course, the medical system, if you're looking at the whole Rockefeller thing, but it's all, again, it's all physical, isn't it? It's all, you've got a physical ailment, so take this physical pill, or your physical arm doesn't work, so we'll physically cut it off, and all this, rather than looking at as, because they look at the body as parts, right? All these bits that have been stuck together rather than a whole. Whereas energy healing looks at the whole, doesn't it, and sort of heals, tunes you, I guess.
Yeah, I agree totally. I mean, in Potentiate Your DNA, I share the work of Dr. Larry Dossey, who is a cardiologist and became a best-selling author. He wrote a couple of early books on basically the role of prayer and sound in healing. And he went on to write some other materials as well and examine the role of the brain and how consciousness is not the brain and that sort of thing. Very, very bright fellow. And he had a model that I adapted to my own purposes about the three eras of medicine. So he was actually giving a kind of history or meta history of medicine. And he said the first era was essentially the Cartesian materialistic Newtonian era, and that he called that era one, and that was your totally materialistic, the body as machine view of medicine. And then we moved into some point over the course of the late 19th and 20th centuries, we moved into a kind of mind body mode with a lot of medicine, sort of starting with Freud and then Jung and other people, and then, Norman Vincent Peale and other people looking at the role of the mind. And then that kind of culminated with epigenetics, which Bruce Lipton writes about very beautifully. But that there's a third era. That was era two, and he called that mind body. And then the third era is non local, and it's the era that where miracles occur, where we actually heal ourselves through a connection with something other than just our own local thoughts. We go into some kind of meta-energetic, metagenetic realm. I call it metagenetic. And we connect with source or time space or our higher selves or something that's not in the room with us in the way that science would currently understand that. And that is where you get your spontaneous healings, your remote healing, distance healing. All of that is part of that model. So I map it out, and then I look at genetics in relation to those three eras. And so era one is all about the primacy of DNA, DNA being this thing that controls the brain, it's the brain of the apparatus and all of this. And then that was really thrown out the window by epigenetics in era two, where you look at the role that the cell plays and how the brain, the DNA is just really the gonads of the cell. And that you've got proteins in the cell membrane that are actually interacting with the environment, and they are kind of like the brain of the cell. So that's very, very fascinating change. But beyond that, there's an era where you have people like Peter Gurayev and Vladimir Proponin doing wave genetics, and other people looking at quantum bioholography, Richard Allen Miller, for example. And then my own work with regenetics, where we're looking at this kind of torsion energy domain as the kind of higher blueprint level above or beside where we are in space time. There's some other level that can be accessed for healing where the blueprints are. So when you,
Mm.
some people might call this the Akashic. They might call this, the ether. It would be a word for it. So the idea is that when you have trauma, for example, like your accident, that experience is stored over in that Akashic domain, that time space etheric domain, and it sits in there in your bioenergy field, which is in that domain as a distortion, and it will continue to create the same experiences of pain, inflammation, and discomfort, lack of flexibility, whatever, as long as it's sitting in there as a distortion. But it is possible to use certain methods to go over into the energy blueprint and remove the distortion. And when you do that, it stops creating that thing and it begins to build a more normalized physical template.
All right. That's what I need to do.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. Because we're hearing a lot about, literally just in the last few years about this quantum healing, which is, I guess, along the same sort of thought lines and remote healing kind of stuff, which was basically just complete woo-woo, 3 or 4 years ago. But now it's almost, becoming accepted, isn't it? That you can do distance healing, and there's even a site, the medbed.com, and that's just all distance, sort of, they call it quantum healing, which is this, yeah, non-local kind of healing. So I mean, we're starting to see that already, aren't we?
Well, sure. I mean, there's quantum entanglement that's been talked about for a long time. And then you have this recent Nobel Prize was basically this, what they're calling a proof, and I'm not sure that anything has ever been proven, just so you know, in this quote unquote reality. But it was a proof that the universe is not real locally, which is, just a millimeter away from saying that we're living in a simulation.
Yeah.
Because we can look at this as a physical world that has quantum aspects, right? But really, that's just a half-assed way of talking ourselves out of going down the rabbit hole into what's really happening, which is that we're living in a thoroughly non-local realm that does not have any physical substrate.
Mm. So basically, yeah, you're saying it's some kind of projected reality simulation, and our consciousness is here, but is that what you mean when you're saying it's non-local?
Yeah, the non-local stuff has to do with the idea that if you try to identify local reality, like something that is real, like this is real, it just, you can't do it, and it can be mathematically disproved.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
It's sort of the extension of what's been going on for a long time as we go deeper and deeper and deeper into the so-called atom, right? There's just no there there. It's like
Mm,
Gertrude Stein's hometown of Kansas City. There is no there there.
mm.
So now there's been a Nobel Prize awarded for taking that to the next place and saying there really is no there there. It's not something that we can actually prove, which is
It's
kind of fascinating.
potential, isn't it? That's kind of what they find when they get to the lowest spot. But like you say, if you keep looking, it's like that, search and you'll find. But are we creating what we're finding because we're searching.
Yeah, maybe we are. I mean, I believe that we live in an observer-based reality. I believe that this notion of the Heisenberg uncertainty principle, where you have a scientific experiment and you think, oh, this is science and it's going to determine something objective that's external to me, and then you observe the experiment as the scientist and you change its outcome.
Yeah, the double slit. Yeah.
That's just completely whack. That's just absolutely crazy. That shouldn't be happening in a real world. It shouldn't even be happening in a world that has, let's say, some kind of quantum aspect. Really, it's hard to even imagine how that would happen in a quote unquote real world. But actually, what I was saying about the simulation concept, where I differ from some people, is that I feel that the universe, the multiverse, whatever the realm is that goes on and on and on, is really it's all a product of mind. This is what the Vedics would call Maya. It's illusion, and it's fractal. So they're essentially very similar copies of things going on as you spin out into infinity. And in those, this is of course speculation, but in those various realms, they might differ in certain ways, and one might appear more real than others. But if it's all a product of mind, one has to ask oneself what material is. Is there such a thing as material if everything is a product of mind?
I mean,
Or
well,
is it all an
yeah,
energetic construct?
I've
All
always,
holographic at all?
mm, I've looked at it as sort of condensed energy, but which is different really from a projected, isn't it? From a projected reality that we're sort of interacting with. How do you
Well,
see
as
it?
we experience it, it's very.
Sorry, what was that?
I was just going to say that I was going to agree with you that as we're experiencing it, that energy would be very condensed, quote unquote. It
Mm.
would seem very real.
So that's almost the potential aspect is a bit, all there is potential, which is energy, I guess, that can become anything. And it's our intention and thoughts that make it form into something that we can interact with.
Yeah, in an observer-based reality, that would appear to be how it works. And we're somehow, whether we're being jacked in from outside the matrix
Mm.
or there's some other mechanism going on. I don't know that all of that is pure speculation. We can maybe get intimations of that through various experiences. There's also the shamanic perspective on all of this, where you do have, um, people reporting various kinds of shamanic journeys, seeing certain things. You have your ayahuasqueros, you have, what they see when they go into this energetic realm, and it appears to be like all snakes that it looks like DNA, but it's the energy field also. And here it's like they're teaching you something. They're almost sort of they're the ayahuasca version of the peyote plant in Castaneda, the mescalito. And so they have a personality, and they're there teaching people who go on that journey things about how the multiverse works, or how this corner of it works anyway.
Mm. Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? It makes me think of Terence McKenna when he was talking about mushrooms and he was talking about aliens, and if you wanted to send a message, what would you do? You just sort of send mushrooms, right? And then when you have them, the spores make you connect with that other realm or whatever, which it's kind of what looks like it to be. I mean, yeah, it looks like we can connect with the spirit realm. Do you see that as what do you think that realm is? Do you think that's one realm, which is what we're told is heaven? Do you think that's what people experience on ayahuasca and these other sort of um, drugs or medicines, whatever we want to call them? Or do you think that that's like a mental construct made by us? Does that make
Hmm.
sense? Like, do you think that people are visiting
Yeah.
another realm, like it's a key or a gateway kind of? That's what the plant's doing.
Hmm. Well, let's see. I can come at this from a few different angles. I know that shamanically, in the Toltec lineage, there's something called the crack between
Yeah.
worlds, that you can literally slip through into that other world and you can find helpers who appear to be disembodied spirits. They're possibly ancestors. So in that sense, it's kind of the afterlife. There's also the difference between where we live, which is the tonal, and the nagual, which appears to be very similar to that realm. And there's also all of the kind of torsion physics that I've been following for and writing about for a long time, where we live in some kind of apparently physical reality, but then there's a blueprint realm where all of this etheric energy resides, and possibly that's the realm of spirits. Dewey Larson, in his reciprocal system of physical theory, which I just like to call reciprocal theory, he postulated years ago that we live in space-time, and our complementary world that we interact with is time-space. So I wrote this book called Snooze about this kid who journeys into time-space to look for his father who has disappeared there. He's figured out how to activate his dreaming, his cities, and he goes after the father. And so I had a very long 480 something page meditation on like what that world might be like from that perspective. But then there's also the simulation possibility, that what we're looking at is we're in maybe space time, but what we're calling time space or the afterlife is really just the realm of the programmers,
Code.
which could be ourselves. It's
Yeah,
the
yeah,
coding
yeah,
realm. It's
yeah,
the people, you know, but it might be something they would perceive as a reality, and they think they're creating the simulations for themselves to go through, and then they jack in, and things happen, or people get sometimes trapped in the simulation or whatever. The irony could possibly be that those people don't realize they themselves are in a simulation. And that gets back into that fractal imagery I was bringing up, where
yeah.
everything is kind of repeating the same patterns over and over again. It appears more and more real, perhaps, but it doesn't make it any less of a simulation.
Mm, yeah.
It's all a product of mind. It's all mind.
And we do hear that kind of story, echoed, in lots of sort of ancient texts and things is, beings being trapped in here, the whole fall thing and all that kind of stuff. Like, as far as what's going on, how do you, if we're looking at this as a simulation, do you like, what do you see that, the negative force as? Do you think that's like something like, is the game being hacked or something? Is it a program? Is it part of the program? Is it, this is it meant to be there, the sort of evil side? What are your thoughts there?
So don't hate me. So I wrote this other book called Kali the Destroyer, and it's about the archons and
Yes.
about what this adversarial force is, right? And in that book, I portray the archons as basically extraterrestrials or interdimensional beings that have some reality. And so I actually have the Lord Archon, the Demiurge, Yaldabaoth, whatever you want to call this figure, as a character in the book, along with the character of the goddess Sophia and her consort Thelete. These are in the Mahavidyas. They're all there. They're all sitting there. All of these ancient figures related to this drama that then was kind of codified in the Gnostic texts. Having said all of that, I don't really think that that's what's going on here. I think what's going on is that we are in a some kind of some kind of school, some kind of veil of soul making, as John Keats would have called it, where we agree to experience certain difficulties, problems, and perhaps even a deeply adversarial relationship with the world that we find ourselves in, so that we will grow and eventually figure out that there's only one of us here. We have to look in the mirror. We have to look at the shadow aspect of all of this, and eventually, at least on a macro philosophical level, it's just us. And we can't be at war with ourselves. If we have to basically be willing to go to peace. And
Mm.
then I think that changes the entire dynamics of the quote unquote reality that we're experiencing. This is kind of like Neo, and this came up in a recent interview I did with Waters Above, and he made this point. He's like, everyone talks about the red pill, like that's the big moment in the Matrix, but it's not really the big moment. It's the beginning of a journey. The really big moment in the Matrix trilogy, it's when Neo is fighting Smith, and Smith keeps multiplying and multiplying and multiplying and multiplying, and the harder Neo fights, the more Smiths there are. And then Neo just stops and he wins.
Yeah, yeah, exactly right. Well, let's say energy goes where energy flows, where attention goes. Like we create what we focus on, isn't it? Which is,
Yeah, and I think Jung said what we resist persists.
yeah, yeah, exactly. This is the thing is pushing is actually two forces because you can't push unless there's something resisting it, right? That's just called walking forwards. So yeah, exactly. Whenever we're pushing, there's an opposite force that we're giving life to. Yeah, interesting. The Matrix. So you don't see it as any kind of nefarious, sort of taking over of the program or beings coming in or anything like you sort of looking at it as this was all agreed to and sort of pre-arranged and predestined before we came in.
That's how I tend to see it. I mean, in the shamanism, you have the Toltecs referring to this force as the flyers. And there is, depending on who's doing the talking, some people feel like it's an intrinsic part of some kind of reality, and other people feel like it's part of an elaborate game or program or setup or whatever. So,
Mm,
I tend to feel that we're looking at something that we ourselves have played a role in devising,
mm,
and that a part of ourself is now experiencing that. And I think there is only one self ultimately, and that self is experiencing itself in a potentially infinite number of ways. So it has to get very creative in how it does that so that it doesn't get boring. And so the game doesn't become too easy.
mm. Yeah, and I mean, this is the thing, right? Growth is never easy or comfortable, and change, all this kind of stuff. So if it is for our greater good, it's not going to be comfortable, isn't it? We've all seen what happens when you get too comfortable and you sit around just doing nothing. You definitely don't grow much, and so many people, get annoyed and think it's all evil and everything, but it's like we were just saying, if that's what you focus on, well, that's what you sort of create, and that's what you end up experiencing, isn't it? And maybe that's it. Is when it is the whole lesson is to control what we create. I think Jason says it. You wouldn't sort of let a major manifester out into the real world if they didn't know what they were doing. Because they just cause havoc, wouldn't they? So maybe this is kindergarten, right? And we're just learning how to control ourselves.
Yeah, I mean, it makes sense to me. It intuitively resonates with how I see things and how I've experienced things. And even, back to this question of, hardship and difficulty and their relationship to us. And I keep bringing in the shamanism, but I think it's a very useful teaching tool for understanding this. You have In Toltec shamanism, you have four enemies of the man or the person of knowledge, right? Who's trying to make a journey of consciousness to a higher level of empowerment. The first enemy is fear. So a lot of people are stuck right there right now, and they're absolutely defeated before they even start the journey. They're just scared shitless, and they're never going to move forward. And they're gonna put on the face diaper, et cetera, and away with that. But if you manage to make it through fear, you arrive at clarity. But that's actually just another enemy, because that is potentially where you are, where you suffer paralysis through analysis. You're very clear and you're not afraid anymore, but you're not able to move out of contemplation and intellectualizing everything. I see that all the time. And then there's a third level beyond that, which is power. So you finally figure out how to move and you begin cultivating power, and you think that's like the end all be all. You've arrived, you're the big man on campus. And then the fourth enemy shows up, which is old age.
Mhm. Wow.
And that is to say death. And so your death becomes your ultimate, your final enemy and your final teacher. And so the Toltecs were able to embrace that at that high level. They could embrace their death as their teacher. And they certainly would never have called their death evil or Satan or anything like that, which is what so many people are doing with this concept of the archons and the demiurge or whatever, because they're scared to death of it. They equate it with something like death. And really, although it might cause a lot of destruction, I think that people who are on this path of awakening have a kind of like armor of God around them. And it doesn't mean they're necessarily impenetrable or invulnerable, but what I'm trying to say is that there are protections in place for people who are really engaging the game and trying to go to the next level, people who are trying to level up.
Mm,
So even though, yes, this archontic interface or this parasitic aspect of the programming, yes, it can cause havoc, it can cause death and that sort of thing. But that doesn't mean it's evil, and it doesn't mean it's without benefit, just as death in the Toltec teaching is a great benefit.
mm. Yeah, well, yeah, like I said, they've made everyone scared of death, you know. They definitely don't teach us about it. It's definitely this, you know, mysterious thing, right? That's definitely not good. You know, I did a show a while back, and we sort of discussed, wouldn't it be interesting if we looked at death as, you know, like a journey and gave people a send off, you know, and made it, which I guess they do it, you know, with wakes and that they have parties. But yeah, I mean, to
Yeah.
me, death is just a door, right? It's just a door. So it'd be interesting to look at it as a teacher, because as you get older, I guess you start to see there's less time, right, between you and that door. And so it makes you, yeah, look at life differently. You then got to, you know, get your priorities in order and start thinking what you really want to leave behind. So and that's what we don't have, you know, in our societies, this structure and this, I guess, like ceremony. You know, we don't have, you know, becoming a man or a woman ceremonies anymore, or becoming an elder or anything, do we? We just sort of trying to find our way through this crazy world, which I guess is the point of it, really, isn't it?
I mean, it is to me. The idea of death as a teacher is very related to what you were saying. One of the realizations you have is that you don't have a lot of time. One of the levels of hypnosis that people are under in this world is that they have unlimited time. They are immortal. They will be here always, and or at least they act that way. And that's really a product of a deep archontic, if you will, hypnosis. That's a product of this construct. So death is a teacher in that it quickens your awareness of your mortality, especially as you get older, and it invites you to live more as if each day is your last, and it creates ultimately a much more fulfilling existence
Mm,
than just pretending that you're going to be here always. And so everything you do begins to take on a certain level of importance. There's a
mm,
teacher. It's the peyote. It's mescalito, which I mentioned, and this. So it's a power plant, a spirit, plant spirit medicine. And
mm,
this teacher is defined as someone who teaches the right way to live. And when you boil it all down, what that means in the context of these teachings is that it teaches you how to simplify your life and identify what is important and how to go about doing those things the most efficiently possible.
mm. Yeah, it's
It's not like some big moral or ethical thing. It's about becoming more effective.
mm, yeah, yeah. I mean, yeah, people just misuse energy, right? We've only got so many, you know, hours in a day, and, you know, days in a year and years in a life. But yeah, people just throw out energy, don't they? Left, right, and center, without focusing it on what they want to do. And that's, you know, I guess because we don't look at an endpoint, right? We don't look like we're going towards something, because it's a different, you know, in the West, you know, people sort of sit around and wait for death, you know, once they hit a certain age, don't they? They just sort of sit around and wait for it. but it'd be a different
True.
process to work towards it. Like, who do you want to be when you reach that door? Like, it's in all the old books and all the theosophy and religion and all that you need to be a certain kind of being right at death to sort of continue upwards. But people just forget that, don't they? They just kind of roll in and unprepared. And I wonder does that mean we go back and start the level again? Because this is the thing, exactly. That's kind of the way I look at it. Like, you see all these people, they look like they just wasted their entire life, right? They never paid attention, and you just kind of got to think, well, you're going back to the start again, right? You have to learn your lesson, or what's the point of it?
Yeah, that's kind of how I feel about it. I don't I try not to have judgment around that. In fact, I'm just trying to get out of judgment in general,
Yes.
and that's a tall order. But having said that, one can have a certain level of compassion for people in that state without trying to save them or change their lives necessarily or anything like that. I think we have to honor people's decisions, their mistakes, let people walk their paths.
Mm,
So much of the politics in recent times have really revolved around controlling people's paths, controlling people's thoughts, controlling the flow of information. It's all this top-down hierarchical model, and it's the absolute antithesis to what we really need to grow better humans, as it were.
mm. Yeah, but I guess that's the thing. Like, especially the last few years, but this whole sort of realm kind of seems like we get pushed and pushed and pushed until we have to make a decision, right? And it's all to do with us, eventually making the right decision, which is standing up for ourselves, right? And standing in our power and understanding that no one gets to tell us, how to live our lives. And that as long as we're doing no harm, we get to do what we want. But um, we need to wake up to that, right? Like, that's what I
Mhm.
think. That's why all this suppression is, and why it's getting so over the top recently. Because I don't know, it seems something's coming. Well, like, what are your thoughts on both of those?
Yeah, those are good questions. First of all, yes, all of the adversarial aspect you were describing there is, I think, it's part of the teaching program ultimately. Know, is there another way of perhaps going about some of these things? Maybe if you have a really nurturing environment and you get real with people and if you create a world where maybe your challenges are different from these super predatory challenges that we seem to be living through now. I'm not going to say that's impossible because it probably exists somewhere. In terms of where all this is going, certainly I've been following Jason Bashir's work and I've interviewed him 3 times now, and I've really delved very deeply into that. So I think there's every reason to believe that 2040 is very real, the Phoenix phenomenon, that's kind of where this is headed, and 2046, and all of the, Christian eschatological information coming through seems to indicate that we're headed straight towards the apocalypse, and beyond that, possibly the rapture. Where I tend to deviate from that way of looking at things, I see that as being, you've got two options, right? You're either part of the collective and you're going down the toilet, or you're an errant and you're going to go through the rapture and you're ascending and you're out of here. To me, that's still a duality. And I don't think we're here to remain in dualities. And so the third term is the warrior's path, the person of knowledge, the shamanic path, the person who learns how to do things that are beyond even this errant level, where you're waking up to everything and whatnot, but you're still not actually taking the bull by the horns yourself. You're still waiting around for the trumpets to blow and for the pyramid to fire up, or whatever you're doing. You're waiting to be whisked away on a gentle wind and all of this stuff. And I think maybe that's going to happen to a lot of people, and that's cool. But that you don't have to go that way. You can actually very proactively pursue what I call back doors into different realities from where we are. We are not as stuck as some people would have us think. where there are many kind of like the Merovingian was the master of the back doors in the Matrix movies, right? So there are many pathways that we can travel through using our consciousness that literally lead out of here into different worlds.
Wow. I mean, and that's like very, very Matrix, isn't it? Uh, uh, yeah, 'cause I've got a friend, Paul Cook, who's discovering all these tunnels like under basically all over the UK, these underground cities, and we know that they're in, Turkey and all that. And I often wonder if there's a physical back door, like the Matrix with all these people running around, doing the programming. um,
Maybe.
you
You
know,
know, that I was putting together a blog today and I wrote the way out is in, and that's kind of what you're describing.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Like you go around and so you come outside.
I mean, yeah, physically it'd make sense, wouldn't it? Because they're always telling us that the way out is up and space and all this kind of stuff. But back doors. So, have you heard of what's his name? Bert Goldman, I think his name is. He talks about quantum jumping, I think he calls it, where he basically he said he's just a guy, he's just this normal guy, but he's got like art hanging in like museums, and he's written best-selling books, and he's just done all these random things that aren't connected. And he says the way he's doing it is he's going into meditations and basically finding alternate realities where he is whatever, right? Where he's an artist, and then he teaches himself how to paint. He comes back here and he can paint like a good artist. Is that a similar
I love that.
concept to the back doors that you're talking about?
Maybe, yeah, maybe this alternative dimensional way of looking at things. I will say this: I've been quantum jumping for years. I brought through genetics like that. It was a total download. There was a spiritual component to it where literally Lee and I saw lights coming across the water and they hopped into our bodies, and it was this shamanic, very, very bizarre experience. I downloaded the book Snooze, The Story of Awakening that came to me. I downloaded Cali the Destroyer from God knows where and wrote it. I wrote that book. I downloaded that book at the before the end of 2019, and it was all about the pandemic.
Oh, wow.
And then I started writing it. What I was writing, and what I had been told to write was what started happening, and it kept going on and on and on.
Wow, that must be freaky.
But, but I would say, in a larger sense, artists in general have been doing this quantum jumping for a very long time. This is inspiration. This is tapping into to other other modes of thinking and being creative. And it can be very dramatic in terms of your body of work, or it can be more focused. But each iteration of the creative act seems to involve some aspect of quantum jumping. There's this amazing line in one of Percy Shelley's poems where he describes the imagination as like a burning coal that as soon as you look at it, it's already losing its intensity of light. And the
Wow.
act of receiving an inspired idea is very much like that. It's like you've reached through where that idea was born, and as soon as you pull it into this world, it starts cooling off, and you only have so long to make good on that coal before it goes out.
Yeah. Yeah, wow. 'Cause I used to think a lot about the concept of original thought and just the fact that no one has it, right? Like everything is just a repeat of someone else. But yeah, right. I mean, what you're talking about, I mean, that sounds like a original or maybe more inspired thought, but that's what we're kind of lacking, isn't it? From this experience at the moment is obviously that, that they powers that want to be, they shut off our creativity and they tell us all this stuff is, doesn't exist, right? You when you go to school, you've got to, get rid of your imaginary friend and all this, and suddenly fairy tales aren't real anymore. And they shut that right down, don't they? And to the point where if you say, oh well, you know, I got a song, given to me by whatever. they'll lock you up in the loony bin. I mean, we're just really not
Right.
even allowed to go there. So that whole thing has been completely cut off from it, isn't it? So is that another thing that yeah? I mean, this is the thing. Like I can understand how people can see that this place, whatever, is a prison planet or has been invaded or blah blah blah. Because it really does look like that, doesn't it? But I suppose when you get
Mhm.
down to it, it really is about us overcoming all this stuff because there's just examples everywhere of, if you put up with it and give up and say it's a prison planet, well, we see these people, they don't achieve anything, right? And then we see people who are like, no, I'm just gonna create my own, and they can. So I'm not sure what I just said there. I think I answered my own question, but I mean, it's a strange realm we find ourselves in, isn't it? It's it's Yeah, but we're in the apocalypse, and it's all sort of being shown to us, isn't it, right now, what this place is, which is pretty interesting. Um, 2040 is a long way away. I always like, can the world, how can the world keep getting crazy to 2040? This is sort of my issue with that date is it's like the world is so insane at the moment. I mean, did you see Sam Smith wearing that inflatable bloody thing? I mean, balloons, right? UFO invasion. It's like, is it going to keep getting crazier, do you think, for another, what have we got, 18 years or 17?
You know the Hunter S. Thompson quote, when the going gets weird, the weird go pro. So this is the time for all of us to go pro. All of us who are already inclined to be a little weird, we need to be prepared to step up our game because this shit's going to get real and it's going to get weird fast, like super weird. That's what I believe. In
Mm,
the midst of that, we're going to be given, it's almost like there's some kind of major separating out happening. We're going to have these gaps and pockets where we can create amazing things, amazing relationships, amazing communities, amazing art, amazing achievements. And people are going to be filling those gaps constantly. I feel that happening on, let's say, YouTube, for example, where you have certain people. I feel like there's been a lot of kind of middling content for a long time in the alternative realm, and then a lot of just downright disinfo.
mm,
And now there are some channels, people like you, people like Jason. I was listening to John
yeah,
Levy's
yeah.
latest piece today, where he was talking about Jason's work, and I just feel like there is some reality that's really creeping into the space, and people are filling those gaps, and their audiences are growing, and there's so much energy around what Jason's doing because he's actually providing the data to back up a lot of what he's saying.
Mm.
And it's very exciting, and people are extremely enthusiastic about it, and they should be.
Yeah, well, people are clearly, hungry for answers, right? For knowledge. And I guess it's because, the world's getting weirder and weirder all the time, right? So people every day are waking up going, hang on, what the hell's going on here? which is which is good. And like I said before, a lot of these mainstream people are just being exposed for what they are. A lot of these sort of false prophets that we get given, and they sort of got all these followers, and then yeah, they're all. I'm starting to see them all get exposed and all sort of shown for who they really are, which is again that's the apocalypse, right? The unveiling. We're sort of being shown, all this stuff, how we've been manipulated, all this yeah, we're being shown what the game was that we've been playing, really, aren't we? Which I guess begs the question: what happens at 2040? Is the game over? Do you think? Like, do we start again? You mentioned the pockets. That there's clearly a split of some kind happening, right? Some people want the smart city, and some people are no way. So, yeah, what are your thoughts? Obviously, we don't know, but what are your thoughts on what happens like at the end point? Like, is it an end point? Is it a beginning point? Do we all ascend? Do we wake up in spaceships? What do you think?
Right. I mean, these are just my thoughts, my
Yeah.
speculations based on some of the archaics data and some other pieces of data that I've been able to put together. But I think that 2040 is a kind of pole shift that will be damaging in the east. Not in Australia, not in that neck of the woods, which is, thank goodness. But in lots of the, let's say China is going to be in the crosshairs of that, and a lot of coastal areas right at the coast could be very, very affected. I think that's going to bring back this vapor canopy. I think that's all over the place, and right, people are really looking at how that's scientifically possible. You've got scientists like in Glen Rose, Texas, looking at building like biospheres and that kind of thing to
Yeah.
replicate those conditions, and then doing experiments on insects. Just really crazy stuff. So with the vapor canopy, you're going to have the loss of a lot of our current technology. So I think that's going to be the end of the internet. It's going to be, if you're set up with solar or electric or whatever, you're screwed. We really need some alternative structures in place. Like there's I forget the name of this. It's like rail something, or it's a type of energy device where it's almost purely mechanical, where you take weights and you push them up, let's say like a bar, and then as those weights descend, they generate energy. So something like that would work beautifully in a vapor canopy. So there are definitely technologies that could be utilized in that world to power things up. And there might even be different ways of communicating that we're not aware of at the moment. But then you've got 6 years later, you've got the 2046 event, which is the Nemesis X object, which is going to, really, that's a whole new can of worms. So I really think that's when, it's after that we're really talking about the apocalypse heating up and things, really, possibly going to hell in a handbasket, for some people. Once again, in Jason's model, you have this idea that that's at some point in this window that will be when most errants will be whisked away. So that's the rapture, which is a terrible word, but
Mm.
it is what it is. So that's his model. And then you've got this idea that I've been putting forward that you've got a class of people, the warriors, the shamans, whatever, who they don't care one way or the other because they're not subject to this stuff anyway. Then you have the rest of humanity, the collective, who's really in for a tough time, and eventually the big reset. We're talking, the plasma reset type of thing.
Mm.
But that doesn't happen until 2106 or something like that.
Gosh. Wow. So we're in for a bit of upheaval. What are your thoughts on, with the vapor canopy? A lot of people are talking about us getting, powers and things, things like telepathy, but also, like superhumanity type, strength and all this kind of stuff. What are your thoughts on that? We're going to turn into superheroes?
Well, there's certainly evidence that people grow larger and
Yeah.
stronger.
Yeah.
One question I have is, for a person who is already in one physiology and used to one biosphere, like a person today, when they transition into the vapor canopy world, there is evidence that you will grow a little bit, at least a few inches, because there were these scientists who got under a partial vapor canopy down in Mount Pele, I think, when that erupted, and they were like in their 40s or 50s, and they ended up growing a couple of inches each, and so it's kind of wild. And certainly the Glen Rose experiments suggest that you get in an environment like that, you're going to get bigger, you're going to get stronger.
Hmm.
But I doubt that existing humans are going to grow a lot. They might grow some. It's really the children who are
Children.
born under the vapor canopy who will be much larger. The other thing that I think is very possible is you will see a kind of I don't know, flowering of archetypally, classic male and female abilities. You will see, these great hunters and warriors in the men, and you will see these great goddess priestesses in the women who have tons of psychic power. I think all of that is probably the way things are. There's a reason why the goddess religion was predominant under the major vapor canopy before the Great Flood, it was because these women were truly priestesses. They had the ability to access very high levels of cognition and psychic ability, that sort of thing. That's how I process all of that.
Mm, yeah, yeah, no, I'd agree with that. Um, so with the pre, have you read the Aurolinda book at all? Have you come across that?
I mean, I've only seen uh,
Basically,
some videos on it, heard the
yeah,
summary of it, and all. I haven't actually read it myself.
yeah, it's from the north. They talk about priestesses and how they were basically the wise people as well, and the priestesses and sort of the highest level people in their communities. They're also very tied to the cathedrals. With these cathedrals, obviously we theorize, the free energy, bringing down ether energy and that, but then we've got this whole sound aspect, right? And the tuning and the vibrations. And then of course, people tell us that they go in these buildings to feel the glory of God, which is probably the frequency. Do you think that these buildings were both, or do you think that they were one or the other? Like, do you think that they were just healing machines or just energy machines or a bit of both? Or what are your thoughts on that, on what these buildings actually were?
Yeah, they may have also just been what they appear to be, which is churches, but the definition of what that is may have been different, or may have been understood differently. So, like I was talking earlier about the cymatic ceiling or the Gregorian chants or whatever, what happened in these spaces, the way people healed. One of the problems I think we get into in a lot of the Tartarian research is there's there is this problem of the vapor canopy and of seeing things, go through a very definitive transition. And what are we actually looking at? I don't know. It's hard to say. And I don't just mean vapor canopy, but I mean all of these resets, like these Phoenix resets and the possibility of liquefaction of the earth. And, what is Cappadocia? What did it look like before, it was discovered, before it was possibly melted, or who know, these are very strange things.
Mm,
Some things are I think we understand historically, like, if you look at the history of Petra, for example, clearly something facaded that, but then behind there you have all of this weirdness that appears like it went through some kind of cataclysm or some kind of melting. And so, I just don't know that ever had our chronology, our timeline in place. That's only now coming into focus, I think, with Jason's work. And that's I think if we look at that very seriously, we get away from all of this, you know, 12,000-year-old human settlement stuff. I think if we look at the 6,000-year period, and this is what John Levy or John Leva, this is what he was saying in his video yesterday, is that really what we're looking at in all of these ruins is stuff that's happened in the last 6,000 or so years.
yeah.
And so that is a good step forward to begin there, and
Mm,
then follow the breadcrumbs. I think people who are looking, like Graham Hancock and other people who are looking so far back in time trying to understand these things, are just really muddying the water, because it's not true. There
uh,
is no history between about 7 years ago and that 12,000 year period. It doesn't exist.
no,
Did everybody just die or go were they in cryogenic freeze, and they woke up 6,000 years later? I mean, maybe, but that seems unlikely.
yeah, yeah. They need their time. They need time, don't they, to fill in their story, to make their stories of, the evolution of, society and their bloody, evolution of human species. They need time to do that. That's why they keep pushing it back and talking in millions of years and all this. And of course, the whole Earth as a ball spinning through space, that needs time as well. Everything that they talk about needs time, right? It's like their equations, that they can't, they need these massive equations to explain that the Earth is a ball when all we see is flat, kind of thing. So yeah, there's just they just yeah over explain everything, don't they? And I was going to ask, did you think do you think that these buildings are left over from the vapor canopy? But obviously, not. We're talking 6,000 years, and that coincidentally is kind of the time frame that they put in the Oralinda book as well, and they talk about leaving a land that sank, sort of 6,000 years ago. So I agree. I think that once we can start to have some kind of a time frame, then at least we can start to piece things together. Can't? And they kind of tell us it's 6,000 years anyway, don't they? Because if you look into the AD, the BC kind of calendar, it only really goes back about 3.5, 4,000 years, doesn't it? And plus the 2,000 we're in now, it's only a
Yeah, I think there's
6,000 year thing.
lots of there.
Mm. Oh,
That makes sense to me for sure. You know, I mean, I'm not a chronologist, I'm not a historian, and I'm just a student, really, like so many of us, I'm just learning as I go along. But what I've been able to put together strongly suggests that what we would call human history is a pretty recent phenomenon.
yeah. And it seems to be getting closer, where all these pictures are starting to appear from, like 1920s and 30s, the electric cars, the segways, like there's photos of, mobile phones and things. There's even, I think in the 40s, maybe 50s, they had like Zoom. They were like zooming to each other, all this stuff. Like, I think, the more you look into this, it looks like this change, this reset of knowledge, at least of our perception of reality, it's keeps getting closer. We're sort of looking at World War II here now, and you could definitely go straight into the 60s, couldn't you? Like they've um history wants to put it all back in the past, that all that that we've been so civilized for hundreds of years, but I don't think I think, that this stuff is, well, it's still happening now, but yeah, it's definitely, history is a lot closer than they want us to believe, for sure. I definitely agree with that. They love to push it back in the past.
I know that my last interview with Jason, we talked about 1902 a lot, and
Yes.
we got down into that, and talking about all of this data that he had received even since he had made his initial videos on the subject, all this technology that appeared after the Phoenix year of 1902, and all these uh, contemporary Fortune 500 companies that had their starts during that window, and all the technology that rolled out, the different things we kind of take for granted today. And he was saying that after those videos that he released, then people were just emailing him all this microfiche data and images and all this just craziness about things having to do with 1902. So really,
1902.
that does seem to be when they hit the fast forward button on all this technology in the modern era. And at the same time, there's so much evidence that all of this stuff was here before anyway, in
Yeah,
one way or another. And then so that's the idea that we have been technologically advanced before. Also, the idea that we are in repeating cycles, and that we're in repeating cycles within those larger cycles that just keep spinning and repeating, and creating all of these patterns.
yeah. It's what it looks like. Where the potential in there, right? We're the ones who get to make a different decision, and do a different action, and create a different cycle, right? Rather than going around in circles, we can start to spiral up maybe. And
Get
so
the hell out of here.
get the hell out of here. Yeah. Do you think that's like a possibility, like going forward? Like, yeah, what do you think the end game is? Like, do you think that if we learn our lesson, and we whatever, grow or whatever, that we, what do we do? Go to another level? Do we I don't know. What are your thoughts there? What's after this realm? What's after this level, do you think?
I don't know. It's a really good question. It's one of those philosophical head scratchers. I know the Toltecs say that we don't really reincarnate. We don't have multiple lives. We have multiple lives, but they are happening
At the same time.
simultaneously. So what you do, you move between timelines. I don't know that I
Well,
necessarily agree
that's
with that. I actually had the experience of there's a relative in my family that I've got some very convincing evidence that that's who I was back in the 50s, and shortly before
wow.
my birth in the 60s, right? So I know people who have had very similar experiences. So I don't know how to make sense of that if there isn't something like reincarnation. And there's a tremendous amount of very interesting research that's been done on that subject,
Mm,
showing facial matches and knowing stuff that they shouldn't have known about that, their
Yeah.
people in their communities, and they would have had to have had some kind of at least psychic link to somebody living, so if that doesn't prove reincarnation, it proves psychic ability or precognition or something very, very bizarre.
Mm. Yeah, yeah. I mean, I was thinking about this theory recently of, when we die, do we then wake up in another, do we become one of our other selves? Like the theory of that there's multiple, us, multiple worlds and multiple versions of us in these worlds, but we're only conscious in one of them. And so if you die in that conscious version, do you then go to another alternate world and become conscious in that life? I mean, it's not a good thought because it sounds like a trap, but I mean, maybe that's what's happening, right?
Maybe so, yeah.
Who knows? I just want to stop going around in circles.
You've seen 13
Yes, exactly right.
I don't want to spoil that for people, but go check
Yeah,
out that movie. It's all about this
def
topic.
definitely go and watch it. And that's, I know we're getting close to our time though, but one thing I noticed, especially, recently since I guess the 60s, 70s is all this technology that we're getting. It seems to mirror our reality, right? We have like, well, now we have video games, and now we're talking about, life being like a video game. We got computers which, have the hard drive, which is the subconscious, and you have your other bits, your conscious mind, all, your inputs, all this, it just all seems to me that it's all just, I don't know, showing us reality, but in a physical form so that we can understand the concepts better. I mean, what better way to teach someone that you're in a, simulated reality than to give them a simulated reality to go play in? Like it seems like there's a bigger plan here, right? That all this stuff, even if it looks bad, and it's really just information about who we are and where we are, as far as I can see.
Yeah, I like that. That's a really good point. And I would add that the technology is also a test because everything is a test. And the nature of this test seems to be, are you sucked into the technology, or does it wake you up so that you see who you are and
Mm,
where you are?
yeah, I agree. I think it all comes down to a choice. We're given all these things, and in the end, it's there. Do you choose to be, who you are? Do you choose to be the God self, if you want to put it that way, or are you going to be this external, being that just does what it's told? It's all a decision, and I think that's kind of the biggest thing, isn't it? It all comes down to us. Whatever happens, we get to choose. At least on some level, we get to choose how we feel, if we're happy or not. But I think in the end, we do get to choose what we create and what we experience down here. And so that's what we're all doing, right? We're all trying to create something better at the moment, which is maybe the lesson, right? Maybe that's what we're the ones that passed the class. We learnt the lesson, and we're now putting it in action,
Yeah. We'll stop saving the world and start focusing on,
saving
you
ourselves.
know,
Yeah,
saving ourselves, if you will.
yeah,
I didn't want to necessarily say it like that because it sounded like we're, little victims.
yeah.
But focus on elevating ourselves, I suppose.
Mm. Well, I think you said it well before when you said, we live in this chaotic world, and that's because the chaos is in us. And so then if you extrapolate that out, then all we need to do is focus on ourselves, right? Get rid of the chaos in ourselves, and the chaos that we experience in the outside world will disappear as well.
Heal yourself and heal the world.
There you go. Just like Michael Jackson said. All right, so at an hour and a half, so I think we'll leave it there. You've got stuff to do, so thanks so much for your time, Sol. That was really good. And of course, we'll put your links below, so if, everyone go across and check out Sol's channel and his books as well. We'll put them down below so you can go and see what he's been writing about, and get some good information. Yeah, so thanks a lot for your time, Sol.
Well, I really appreciate you having me on. This is a lot of fun, and I mentioned earlier I'm a big fan of yours, and this was really great. I appreciate it.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, and I enjoyed it too. Awesome. We have an awesome day, and maybe we'll catch up again soon.
Let's do that. You have a great day too.
Great. All right. Thanks. I'll talk to you soon, mate.
Don't want a complication.